April 14, 1988, the Persian Gulf. An American warship sails directly into a hidden minefield. A sudden, massive explosion tears through the water, nearly snapping the USS Samuel B in half. Miraculously, her crew fights through the night and keeps the ship from sinking. But in Washington, all patience has run out. The response will be swift and merciless. 4 days later, the United States unleashes a retaliatory strike that lasts exactly 1 day. In just 12 hours, the U.S. Navy obliterates offshore military platforms, a missile boat, and a major frigate, wiping out nearly half of Iran's naval power in the Gulf. How did a single hidden mine trigger the largest American naval battle since World War II? And why did this one-day war change the Middle East forever? This is the story of Operation Praying Mantis. On April 14, 1988, the USS Samuel B was patrolling the central Persian Gulf, roughly 65 miles east of Bahrain, on a standard escort mission. For the crew, vessel safety relied on electronic sensors designed to detect standard maritime threats. Yet, these waters were concealing a far more primitive danger. At 0830, bridge lookouts identified 3 cylindrical objects floating just beneath the surface, positioned in a deliberate, narrow formation that suggested a calculated trap. Commander Paul Wren recognized the tactical signature instantly, ordering an emergency reversal to back the frigate out of the hazard zone. Before the ship could clear the sector, a magnetic M08 contact mine, a rudimentary device containing roughly 250 pounds of explosives, detonated directly under the keel. The blast punched a 15-foot hole through the hull, severed the propeller shaft, and instantly neutralized the ship's entire electrical grid. Water flooded the engine room and lower compartments, forcing the vessel to list 5 degrees to starboard.
Just above the pilot house, taking pictures of the mines. And when the mine went off, we all looked back because the helicopter was just lifting off, and a bunch of us thought that maybe the helo blew up. And all we could see when we looked back was a wall of flames and a lot of smoke, heavy black smoke. First thing I did was drop my camera, and a couple of us ran back here, started setting up hoses and grabbing OBAs so that we could fight the fire.
Under standard naval doctrine, a frigate with a ruptured keel and flooded engine room is a total loss, but Wren refused to authorize abandonment. The crew fought for every inch of the ship, using mattresses to stem the inflow, while engineers manually jump-started the generators as the deck settled into the water. The Roberts remained afloat only because of the Oliver Hazard Perry class design, which featured specialized reinforced bulkheads that prevented a catastrophic collapse. While the survival of the Roberts was a technical anomaly, the debris recovered from the site provided a critical link that changed everything. Serial numbers stamped on the mine's casing matched an Iranian vessel previously intercepted by U.S. forces, proving that this was no longer a localized hazard, but a deliberate act of war.
Was a magnet that remained, as well as an imprint of the limpet mine that had been attached. There were also nail holes in the hull of the ship, indicating how it was attached to the ship. What I can tell you is that the limpet mine that was used in the attack is distinguishable, and it is also strikingly bearing a resemblance to Iranian mines that have already been publicly displayed in Iranian military parades.
For the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the evidence was ironclad. Tehran had ceased posturing and initiated a direct, state-sanctioned escalation. Washington now possessed the evidence to justify an overwhelming response, forcing the U.S. command to decide, accept the bait, or force a total confrontation. By April 15, 1988, the intelligence from the Roberts incident reached the highest levels of the U.S. government. For the Reagan administration, the mining of the frigate was no longer an isolated act. It was the inevitable result of a 2-year campaign known as the Tanker War. Since 1986, Tehran had systematically turned the Persian Gulf into a gauntlet, using mines and fast attack craft to disrupt the flow of global energy, forcing Washington to commit nearly the entire Fifth Fleet to protect merchant traffic. President Reagan and his National Security Council faced a critical strategic bottleneck. Previous retaliatory strikes had failed to alter Tehran's calculus, and a policy of containment was hemorrhaging military readiness. Within the Situation Room, the consensus shifted from passive protection to active degradation of Iran's offshore capabilities. The objective was clear: force the Iranian Navy to halt offensive operations through a singular, overwhelming demonstration of force. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Admiral William Crowe drafted a plan to target the platforms Iran used to coordinate its maritime attacks. These structures were not mere industrial assets. They were the command and control nodes for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. By neutralizing these hubs, the U.S. would effectively strip Tehran of its ability to monitor and strike ships in the Central Gulf. The target list was approved with a directive for absolute precision and proportional, yet decisive, force. The task force is engaged. By April 17, the U.S. Navy finalized the tactical architecture for Operation Praying Mantis. Admiral Anthony Less, commanding the Middle East force, organized the fleet into 3 surface action groups: Bravo, Charlie, and Delta, assigning each a specific sector of the central Persian Gulf. SAG Bravo, anchored by the USS Merrill, moved to position itself near the Sahand oil platform, while SAG Charlie and SAG Delta positioned their destroyers and frigates near the Siri and Mubarak fields. The plan favored overwhelming precision over brute force, a surgical approach designed to disable Iran's maritime infrastructure while avoiding a wider regional war. Every commander operated under strict rules of engagement: target only military assets, engage only if fired upon, and maintain the initiative at all costs. Yet, the logistical reality was demanding. Intelligence confirmed the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps had fortified these platforms with anti-aircraft batteries and long-range missiles, turning industrial hubs into hardened defensive bastions. American commanders calculated the risks. A single wrong coordinate or a delayed communication from the bridge could turn the operation into a tactical catastrophe, handing Tehran a significant propaganda victory. To maintain the element of surprise, ships navigated into their designated grids under total radio silence, weapons systems powered down to evade Iranian coastal radar. As the fleet waited in the dark, the crews checked their firing solutions one final time. The storm breaks. At 0800 on April 18, 1988, the surface action groups initiated the strike. The USS Merrill moved into position off the Sahand oil platform, a steel complex functioning as the primary command and control node for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in the southern Gulf. Admiral Less issued a radio ultimatum in both English and Farsi, ordering all personnel to evacuate the structure immediately. When the response remained silent, Merrill opened fire. Her 5-inch deck guns dismantled the upper levels, tearing through the communications arrays and radar modules that had been tracking U.S. movements. As the platform erupted in smoke and debris, the operation shifted to the Siri field. Here, destroyers focused on dismantling the industrial infrastructure that funneled intelligence to Tehran. The strikes were precise, but the Iranian response was immediate. Despite the bombardment, personnel remained on deck, attempting to man light anti-aircraft batteries to return fire. U.S. crews suppressed these isolated pockets of resistance, transforming the platform into a landscape of twisted metal and secondary explosions. The strategy was to degrade the platform's military utility, not to raise them entirely. Yet, the sustained 5-inch naval gunfire remedied the structure's scorched, non-functional shells. By 0930, the Sahand and Siri fields were neutralized as military command hubs. However, the destruction of these platforms triggered a reaction Washington hadn't fully gained out. The Iranian command in Tehran, witnessing the disintegration of their southern maritime eyes, realized their surface fleet was being blinded. They didn't retreat. Instead, they signaled their forward deployed units to engage at all costs. Iran counters with fast attack craft. As the smoke cleared over the Sahand and Siri fields, the Iranian command unleashed their primary maritime deterrent, the Baghamar speedboats. These vessels were small, agile, and armed with rocket-propelled grenades and heavy machine guns. Designed for swarm tactics, not open-water naval combat, Iran launched a multi-pronged assault, with these fast attack craft racing toward the U.S. surface groups at high speed, attempting to force the American captains into split-second tactical decisions. Iranian crews banked on the assumption that American ships would hesitate to open fire on small, potentially civilian-like boats in a congested waterway. They were wrong. The U.S. command shifted from a posture of restraint to one of immediate neutralization. When the Baghamars closed within lethal range, the destroyers signaled their support efforts. Above the horizon, two A-6E intruder attack aircraft, armed with laser-guided munitions and Mark 20 Rock-Eye cluster bombs, dropped into a low-level profile. The pilots didn't engage in a dogfight. They executed a textbook anti-surface strike. The cluster munitions blanketed the speedboats, turning the water around the craft into a lethal gauntlet of high-velocity shrapnel. For the Iranian crews, the tactical paradigm shifted in seconds. The swarm lost its cohesion as individual boats were pulverized or set ablaze before they could even reach their firing range. The destruction of the Baghamars proved that Iran's reliance on asymmetric, high-speed harassment was ineffective against a coordinated, air-supported naval strike. The U.S. forces successfully neutralized the immediate threat, turning the Iranian offensive into a target-rich environment for their naval aviators. Yet, the destruction of the light craft was merely a diversion. In the heat of the air-sea engagement, a new, more formidable Iranian combatant maneuvered toward the American fleet, signaling a direct challenge. The highest value target emerges. As the engagements at the oil platforms concluded, a new, highly lethal threat entered the battlespace. Surface Action Group Charlie, centered around the cruiser USS Wainwright and the frigate USS Simpson, detected an inbound surface contact. It was the Joshan, an Iranian Kaman-class fast attack craft. Though displacing only 275 tons, the Joshan carried a strategic equalizer, U.S.-made RGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles, weapons sold to Tehran before the 1979 revolution. The Iranian captain did not alter course, aggressively closing the distance to the American flotilla. When the Joshan reached a range of 13 miles, Captain James Chandler of the Wainwright issued a definitive bridge-to-bridge radio transmission. "Stop your engines. Abandon ship. I intend to sink you." The Iranian response was absolute silence. Immediately, a shrill warning tone echoed inside the American Combat Information Centers. The Joshan's fire control radar had locked on. A streak of white exhaust erupted from the Iranian deck. A Harpoon missile dropped toward the water, accelerating to Mach 0.8. It entered a sea-skimming profile, flying just feet above the waves. This kept the weapon hidden beneath the radar horizon until the last possible second. The U.S. crews had less than a minute to react. Kinetic evasion was impossible for ships of this tonnage. The defense had to be purely electronic. The Wainwright activated its SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite, broadcasting jamming frequencies to blind the missile's active radar seeker. Simultaneously, the commander ordered the deployment of super rapid bloom off-board countermeasures. Mortars fired SR bar canisters into the air, detonating to form massive clouds of aluminized fiberglass. This chaff created a false radar cross-section far larger than the cruiser itself. Flying blind and deceived by the electronic countermeasures, the incoming Harpoon lost its terminal lock. It veered slightly to the right, screaming past the Wainwright's starboard side, missing the hull by less than 100 feet. The American retaliation was instantaneous. The USS Simpson was authorized to return fire, but instead of using their own harpoons, The crew launched RIM-66 Standard missiles in a surface-to-surface mode. The first SM-1 cleared the launch rail, followed seconds later by a second. The Wainwright immediately joined the counter-battery fighter, launching an SM-1 of its own. The supersonic projectiles streaked across the Gulf airspace, covering the 13 miles in mere seconds. The Joshan possessed no electronic countermeasures capable of surviving this coordinated barrage. The first missile impacted the superstructure, detonating its warhead with devastating kinetic energy. Subsequent missiles struck the hull, obliterating the command center, severing fuel lines, and destroying the engineering spaces. To ensure total neutralization, the American ships closed in, finishing the burning hulk with conventional naval gunfire. The 275-ton craft was effectively erased from the surface. This brief, brutal duel marked the first time in U.S. naval history that surface ships exchanged anti-ship missiles in combat. Yet, the destruction of the Joshan did not signal an end to the violence. It triggered a massive escalation from Tehran's remaining heavy assets. The fury is far from over. While the wreckage of the Joshan settled to the ocean floor, the Iranian naval command at Bandar Abbas made a fatal miscalculation. They refused to withdraw. Instead, they ordered their heaviest surfaced assets into the narrow choke point of the Strait of Hormuz. The Sahand, a British-built Vosper Mark V class frigate, slipped its moorings and steamed southward. Displacing over 1,500 tons, the vessel was heavily armed with anti-ship weapons and manned by a crew actively hunting for vulnerable American targets. Miles above the Persian Gulf, the battle space was being monitored by aircraft from the nuclear carrier USS Enterprise. An A-6E Intruder, an all-weather medium attack jet piloted by Commander Langston, was sweeping the sector using its high-resolution surface search radar. The Intruder was executing a standard combat air patrol, scanning the congested maritime traffic, filtering massive civilian oil tankers from agile military threats. The aircraft's sensors painted a large, anomalous contact moving at high speed, cutting across standard commercial shipping lanes. To confirm the target's identity, Langston initiated a tactical descent, dropping below the cloud deck to establish a visual identification. As the Intruder broke through the overcast, the sleek hull of the Sahand came into sharp focus, but the Iranian frigate had already painted the approaching aircraft on its own radar. Before the American crew could broadcast a radio challenge, the Sahand's fire control systems locked on. The frigate unleashed a volley of anti-aircraft artillery and launched shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles directly at the Intruder. Warning klaxons flooded the A-6 cockpit. Langston executed a violent, high-G evasive maneuver, rolling the aircraft while deploying a dense screen of flares and chaff to blind the missile seekers. The Iranian projectiles streaked past the canopy, missing the jet by a matter of feet. The violent evasion succeeded as Langston pulled the aircraft out of its dive with the twin turbojets screaming. The tactical reality had irrevocably changed. By firing upon an American aircraft in open waters, the Sahand had instantly upgraded its status from a monitored contact to an active hostile target. Langston stabilized the Intruder, climbed out of the lethal anti-air envelope, and transmitted the frigate's exact coordinates back to the strike group. The reconnaissance phase was over. The crew activated their targeting computers and armed their ordnance. The killing blow descends. With the Sahand burning and sinking into the Gulf, the Iranian Naval Command committed their final major surface combatant to the fray. The frigate Sabalan navigated out of the port of Bandar Abbas, streaming directly into the operation zone. This specific vessel was infamous among commercial mariners. Its captain had spent the previous year ruthlessly machine-gunning the bridges of unarmed civilian tankers. Now, the Sabalan was advancing into a battle space entirely dominated by American air and sea power. A flight of A-6E Intruders from the USS Enterprise, led by Lieutenant Commander James England, quickly acquired the solitary frigate on their surface search radars. Despite the absolute annihilation of her sister ship just hours earlier, The Sabalan did not alter course or retreat. As Engler's aircraft maneuvered into a reconnaissance profile, the Iranian crew fired a salvo of surface-to-air missiles. The projectiles failed to track, entirely defeated by the intruders' on-board electronic countermeasures. In response, Engler ascended, established an attack vector, and released a single GBU-12 laser-guided bomb. The 500-pound munition tracked the laser designation with lethal precision. It dropped perfectly down the Sabalan's exhaust stack, penetrating deep into the vessel's armored hull before detonating directly inside the main engineering spaces. The confined explosion gutted the ship from the inside out. It instantly ruptured the propulsion systems, shredded the engine room, and paralyzed the electrical grid. The Sabalan went dead in the water, listing heavily and venting thick black smoke. Engler encircled the crippled frigate, locked his remaining ordnance, and radioed the fleet command, waiting the authorization to deliver the killing blow. Thousands of miles away in the Pentagon, the National Command Authority evaluated the geopolitical board. The United States had sunk an Iranian fast attack craft, destroyed the armed Baghamar speedboats, annihilated the Sahand, and now crippled the Sabalan. The Iranian surface fleet was effectively dismantled. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral William Crowe, consulting with the Secretary of Defense, issued a direct order down the chain of command to halt the strike. The consensus was clear. They had shed enough blood for one day. The directive was absolute. Allow the Iranians to tow their broken ship home. Sinking a paralyzed, defenseless vessel would cross the threshold from a proportional military response into outright slaughter. The American forces held their fire, watching the smoldering ruin being dragged back to port. The true cost was not found in the ship. By sunset on April 18, the waters of the Persian Gulf fell quiet. In less than 12 hours, Operation Praying Mantis had broken the blue water backbone of the Iranian Navy. The claim that the United States destroyed half the Iranian fleet was not hyperbole. Crippled by a strict post-1979 arms embargo, Tehran's operational surface combatants were reduced to just 3 aging destroyers, 4 British-built frigates, and 2 corvettes. By sinking the frigate Sahand, paralyzing the Sabalan, and obliterating the sole missile boat Joshan, American forces wiped out more than 50% of Tehran's functional anti-ship strike capacity. Stripped of their maritime leverage and exhausted by an 8-year trench war against Iraq, the Supreme Command faced a stark geopolitical calculation. 3 months later, Ayatollah Khomeini announced the acceptance of a UN ceasefire, a decision he publicly called more deadly to me than poison. The United States had closed the tanker war, yet the aftermath brought a profound legal paradox. In 2003, the International Court of Justice ruled the operation an unlawful use of force, declaring the U.S. failed to definitively link the targeted platforms to the specific mine that struck the Roberts. But the true legacy of this one-day war is not found in international courts or rusting wreckage. It is found in how Tehran adapted. Having learned that confronting the American Navy conventionally guarantees national suicide, Iran discarded traditional naval warfare. They spent decades decentralizing, investing in drone swarms, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and proxy militias to disrupt global shipping with complete plausible deniability. The devastation of their surface fleet also validated a dangerous calculus. If conventional assets cannot deter a superpower, only a nuclear program can guarantee regime survival. Overwhelming kinetic force did not erase the adversary, it forced them to mutate. The Persian Gulf remains one of the most volatile geopolitical fracture points on Earth. The ghost of Operation Praying Mantis haunts every modern encounter in these narrow straits. The weapons have evolved, and the tactics have mutated, but the geographic reality is absolute. He who controls the choke point controls the global artery. Thank you for watching. Constructing these in-depth military documentaries requires extensive research and resources. If you value this level of tactical and historical analysis, subscribe to the channel and support our work. Let us know in the comments which conflict or operation we should deconstruct next.